It is exactly 11 after 9 o'clock. Welcome back to News and Views on Salam Media. Now, on Tuesday, the High Court in Gauteng ordered Cyril Ramaphosa to make public his answering affidavit on the DA's application to force government to arrest Putin when he arrives for the BRICS summit. Ramaphosa then responded and indicated that, or rather, his affidavit has revealed that arresting Russian President Putin would be a declaration of war with Russia if Putin traveled to South Africa for the BRICS summit in August and gets arrested here. Let's unpack this further. It sounds really very serious. Let's unpack it further with Dr. Eyita-Okon, Wits School of Governance, University of Witwatersrand, obviously. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
Good to have you on the show. And is the situation as serious as it sounds, that there's a possibility, if Putin gets arrested on embarking in South Africa, there could be a possibility of a war? To me, it sounds kind of almost pretty far-fetched. Your thoughts, Doctor?
Thank you again for having me on the show. Definitely, this emerges as a result of the kinds of immunities that the international law bestows on sitting heads of state. Sitting heads of state as well as diplomats are entitled to certain kinds of immunities, personal immunities, diplomatic immunities. And in this case, because we're talking about the head of a state, the head of state immunity is definitely applicable here. And with such immunities, again, with the ICC, it remains a controversial situation, because while the immunity allows or prevents or restricts heads of state from being arrested or exempts them from being arrested, Article 27 of the Rome Statute kind of strips heads of states away from that immunity in a case where they have been accused of war crimes or some level of grievances have been brought against them to the court. And this continues to be a bone of contention in international law. When heads of states have been accused of war crimes, what happens? How does the ICC respond? Given again that it's international law, there's not much authority that the ICC has in physically arresting or carrying out its judicial responsibilities like a police would do within a nation state. And so they have to, like every other part of international law, rely on member states to come to the table and help them enforce international law. And in the case where a member state is refusing or unwilling to follow through or force the requirements of the court, it becomes then that there should be traditionally. I mean, when you look at the pattern so far with al-Bashir, for instance, with Gaddafi as well, there has been no consequence on the member states. So the dynamics are looking sort of different, because it looks like there's so much pressure being placed on Cyril Ramaphosa to actually arrest. And if that occurs, that in itself, in the confines of international relations, is a declaration of war by South Africa to Russia.
What do you suppose would happen? Let's take that worst case scenario, Dr. Eyita-Okon, that he comes in due to pressure on President Cyril Ramaphosa. They do arrest Putin. How do you suppose it would play out when you say it's a declaration of war? What would happen, and where would I'm trying to, I'm trying to figure out where and how the Russians would then declare war on South Africa. In what form, and from which country would they use? Which African country would they use as their base to go to war with South Africa? It sounds like an absolutely horrendous, but also at the same time unimaginable situation playing out here in South Africa, given that our SANDF is so poorly equipped and poorly trained.
Well, I mean, we should not doubt the military capabilities that Russia at this point embodies or has. I mean, if they've been able to sustain the Ukrainian war, which most of us in international relations following the story did not anticipate that the war would last this long, given the very quick, strict responses by neighboring countries and the US and Europe as well with the sanctions. We did not anticipate that the war would go on this long, but the has gone on this long. And reinforces the narrative that Russia has the military capability to sustain a war. Now, in terms of the technicalities of how it would attack, of course, there are long-range weaponry that it could use, but of course, we are not sure what kinds of tactic it would use, whether it would start off with economic warfare and then move on to military warfare or chemical warfare. We're not sure what the response would look like, but definitely there will be a response, because if there is no response, then it sets a precedent in international relations that a head of a powerful state can be arrested and there will be no consequences because of a supposed partnership, for instance, that South Africa has with Russia within the confines of the BRICS. So we are anticipating that if Russia Putin gets arrested, there certainly would be some level of response, whether economically or through blatant military warfare by Russia. But following the story and understanding where South Africa stands on this very situation, South Africa, yes, it's a democracy, it's a liberal democracy, also has to prioritize its national interest. And at this point, the priority for South Africa is protecting its jurisdiction, protecting all who dwell in its jurisdiction, ensuring that the dynamics of a war in Europe do not play out in the territory of South Africa. And this is the kind of dicey situation that Cyril Ramaphosa finds himself in. I am anticipating he will not arrest Putin, and in that case, the AU would have to rally around Cyril Ramaphosa to negotiate and defend should the ICC and America decide to be more forceful or enforce more sanctions as a way of punishing South Africa for not following the ICC's request.
Absolutely. Now, this is how Ramaphosa has responded, and I quote, "It would be inconsistent with our constitution to risk engaging in war with Russia. I have constitutional obligations to protect the national sovereignty, peace and security of the Republic, and to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights of the people of the Republic to life, safety, and security, among other rights in the Bill of Rights," he said. And he went also on to say that he was never opposed to making his affidavit public. Do you think that he should have made this public way back, and we wouldn't have had all of these ongoing discussions from opposition political parties and the DA having taken the matter to the High Court?
I think we need to understand that this is a very serious issue, and of course, it risks being highly politicized within South Africa, because the parties are trying to have different agenda and are trying to achieve different goals. But the truth remains that, of course, he was not opposed to making this public within the confines of South Africa, making this public and known to the South African public. But the clause of confidentiality was for the ICC and not necessarily for the South African public. So that confusion, or the DA using that as ammunition to say that he intended to keep this information confidential, kind of falls away, because it was confidential. The clause of confidentiality was SEC and not necessarily the South African public. I think South Africa, through Cyril Ramaphosa, has always made its position clear. It is a member of the non-aligned movement, and they should, and I believe that countries like America, for instance, or even counterparts in Europe, need to also know when to toe the line. South Africa is a sovereign entity. It has the right to make decisions that would protect and put its national interests first, the same way America and countries within Europe do the same, prioritize their national interests. And arresting Putin puts the South African public at risk, puts South African lives at risk, puts the resources, the capacity, the capabilities of SANDF at risk. If SANDF is not prepared to respond to a powerful country like Russia, because we're not sure, we cannot anticipate how Russia would respond, then South Africa should not be forced to. These matters can be addressed in multiple or different ways without having to implicate and undermine the sovereignty of South Africa the safety of South Africa, the peace and stability of South Africa and the region. And should South Africa arrest Putin, it not only puts the South African public at risk, but puts the Southern Africa region at risk of destabilization as a result of a potential response by Russia. So there also needs to be a respect and the prioritization of South Africa's interest in terms of peace, security, and order in the pursuit or the attempt to get Vladimir Putin arrested. So that needs to be taken into consideration as well.
Absolutely. Undoubtedly, this has made global headlines. By now, all the ICC will have gotten this news already and understand the reasons why South Africa's never said that they're retracting the invitation to Putin. There must have been very many closed door discussions with top heads of government and top heads of South African and Russian government officials, Naledi Pandor and other such people, in ongoing discussions with their Russian counterparts, having reassured them that Putin will not be arrested if he sets foot in South Africa, given all of this new information that has come to light. And that would then mean that there is a strong possibility now that there's been this guessing game that's been going on for a while globally. Will he go? Will he not go? Will South Africa arrest him? Will South Africa not arrest him? So it was that situation that was going on. But now that this new information has come to light, there is a strong possibility that Putin will attend the BRICS summit, and also the reassurance that he will not be arrested, because we as a country cannot afford the dire situation of a possible war by Russia on South Africa. As you've indicated, it might be an economic war or maybe a military war, but either way, we cannot afford it.
Definitely. And the other cause of concern would be the safety of Vladimir Putin should he set foot in South Africa. So even though there is an indication that the government is unwilling to follow through or enforce the request of the ICC, there is also a loophole in terms of considering his safety and what the dynamics around keeping him safe within the territory of South Africa would look like, because should anything happen to him, whether it was enforced by the government or not, that could be seen as an act of war, because the sitting president, the sitting head of state, is visiting another country for a BRICS summit, an economic summit, and then is harmed. So that could also be a cause for something that could escalate into a full-blown war. So South Africa or Cyril Ramaphosa, despite having indicated that he's unwilling to arrest, would also have to make sure, if Vladimir Putin would be setting foot in South Africa, make sure that there is security in place to keep him safe until he leaves the country after the BRICS summit.
Undoubtedly, he'll come with his own entourage of security personnel, but we too here in South Africa would need to play our part and to bolster their security contingent to ensure, as you indicated, that he is kept safe. Is it only for the Russian president that we would beef up security and do everything in our power to prevent a disastrous consequence, like perhaps some sort of an assassination attempt? Or would this actually be the type of support we'd give to all heads of state that will be visiting South Africa for the BRICS summit?
Well, I think this is support we give to all heads of state visiting South Africa for the BRICS summit. However, there has to be a special consideration for Putin, given the dynamics currently with the ICC.
Okay, makes sense, simply because obviously there's that ongoing war between Russia and the Ukraine, and there is that possibility that you would have a third force at play to destabilize or, create havoc in the country during the BRICS summit. So yeah, a very, very sensitive time for South Africa and all of the heads of state visiting the country during the BRICS summit. In closing, what else would you like to share with us, Dr. Eyita-Okon? you've really given us an insight into this issue, which I hadn't even applied my mind to, and I realized the severity of the situation.
Definitely. I mean, I think if Russia had agreed, perhaps they could have hosted this BRICS summit somewhere else in maybe another member state, or perhaps had it online, just to relieve South Africa of the stress of just being put under so much pressure by international stakeholders. Um, but we'll see how things play out. We are following the story definitely, but I think it is important that political parties and different stakeholders within South Africa understand that there is a bigger picture, and there's a bigger situation to the story than just merely arresting a head of state. It has severe implications under international relations and international law, and that has to be considered at all times. For every decision being made, it must be considered at all times so that we prevent an unnecessary contestation, conflict, tension, or potential war with a superpower.
And South Africa is certainly not in a position economically or militarily to be able to defend ourselves should something like this actually play out. Please God, it doesn't. Just one other issue which I'm trying to understand. Should Cyril Ramaphosa not have taken the opposition party into his confidence and explained the situation behind closed doors rather than this matter having gone to the High Court?
Well, I mean, I think that it's an opposition party, so of course, this is part of the politics. Politics is always politicking, and this is part of the politics.
Yeah.
There is always there always is something to try to discredit the sitting party, so that it plays into or build up to the next election cycle. So of course, this is healthy for domestic democracy, to ensure transparency. It's a healthy debate. You need opposition to put you on your toes. So this is good. However, I would just caution that the DA treads carefully, because if Vladimir Putin shows up and they defy the national wishes or wishes of the national government and decide to arrest through their respective jurisdiction within the Western Cape, for instance, that it has implications on the entire country and not just the DA or the Western Cape or Cape Town. So that's why I'm saying that there needs to be caution being taken in whatever utterances and decisions and tactics being used by opposition parties on this particular situation. And of course, I mean, there are ways to get Putin. I mean, the US has been great at this. They invaded Libya, or NATO invaded Libya to get Gaddafi. They invaded Iraq to address issues to get Saddam Hussein. So they could potentially consider invading Russia to get Vladimir Putin and leave South Africa out of this international contestation. So that is something else they could consider, because South Africa has expressed its unwillingness, and I think it would be great to respect its wishes, which is also backed by international law.
Dr. Eyita-Okon, it was wonderful talking with you. You've just opened up the issue around this matter. The whole of South Africa has been wondering why Cyril Ramaphosa was not outrightly suggesting that Putin shouldn't visit the country, or that he will be arrested when he sets foot in the country. But now you've given us the big picture on this matter, and it is far more serious than one ever could have imagined it to be. So thank you indeed for your deep insights. And I do hope and pray that someone from the DA is listening into this interview, and that they can apply their minds and stop making silly threats that they're going to arrest Putin should he set foot in the country. But thank you indeed. It was a wonderful interview. Thoroughly enjoyed it. You go well, and hope to have many more conversations with you in the future.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
And you. It is exactly 9:30. News and views on Salam Media, and standing by to talk with us is the trustee of the Al Imdaad Foundation, Qadi Ziad Patel. We're going to be looking at the Sudan crisis, the refugees that has obviously there's a huge issue around a refugee problem regarding this Sudan crisis. And we're going to be talking also about Pakistan's healthcare system being beset by challenges regarding all of the problems that they are experiencing as well. So do stay tuned for that interview. And later on, we'll be talking with Zaki Mamdou. He's a global coordinator, and he is calling for the stopping of the East African crude oil pipeline.